welcome to episode 262 of Prog Review. And today, if you haven't read the title or description, I'm going to be talking about So by Peter Gabriel. You knew that because I mentioned it in the last one, which was about Invisible Touch by Genesis. It's kind of like a second part. It's almost like a double header Prog Review. I remember the day, like I described it in the previous episode. It was 1986. I was 15 years old. Everything was happening. You know, Genesis had an album out, and then Peter Gabriel had an album out, and everyone appeared to be at number one. This album is Gabriel's fifth studio album. It was released on 19th of May, 1986. Like I described, it was trumpeted by the release of the now legendary Sledgehammer song, which is probably more notable for its video, which that was released in April, or just a month earlier. But the video, very technically amazing video, using the animators of the they weren't known at the time, Brothers Key, Nick Park, who went on to do Wallace and Gromit, David Sproxton, who did Morph, and it was typical. Get a little frog in the throat now as I try and wax lyrical about a video. But so we had Sledgehammer trumpeting this album, so we already knew that this wasn't going to be Gabriel's. This was going to be different. It wasn't going to be Gabriel's usual idiosyncratic stuff, and indeed, it wasn't. It was much more accessible, much more immediate. There was still some experimental stuff on it, but it opens with the thunderous Red Rain, complete with Stuart Copeland on the percussion. Red Rain is just an amazing opener for an album, very powerful. I mean, again, when Gabriel does it today on his latest releases, when he does it with the orchestra, and he does it with the back to front Blu-ray, Red Rain is still a powerful song to open a set with. It's a nightmare vision of the sky raining blood. Again, it reintroduces a character that Gabriel has brought to us before. It's almost like a continuation of Here Comes the Flood. Gabriel was writing about a character called Mozo, this kind of mercurial character who was influenced by shortwave radio. We heard about him on the air, and I think DIY, Here Comes the Flood, Down the Dolce Vita, and Red Rain. It was meant to be kind of I don't know if it was meant to be developed into a film or a play or something, but this character is interwoven into various Gabriel songs. No more has been heard of him since, I don't think. So Red Rain, an incredibly powerful nightmare vision, but incredibly catchy, and unlike anything you've heard before from Gabriel. It's all down to the percussion, very powerful percussion. Again, Gabriel, he likes to create stuff from the bottom up. So do I. He often, like I said, it's all about the rhythm of the track. And talking of rhythm, this leads us into the hit Sledgehammer. Again, it goes back to Gabriel's love of soul music from when he was younger, Otis Redding and people like that. And a little ping there. That was someone's messaging me. Someone's telling me to check out some record that I don't particularly want to listen to. So Sledgehammer, it's all sexual innuendo. Indeedy, it's very, very rude. If you dig under the surface, I think it's about how's your father, a bit of slap and tickle. That's what I think it's about. It was overplayed at the time, but I've kind of got back into it. But I remember, familiarity breeding contempt at the time. I wish you'd stop doing that. But I remember the video was the only thing that kind of got me through it. The dancing chickens. Dancing chickens. That's the bit. Whenever I see that video and the dancing chickens come on, it reminds me of watching the video with my dear late grandmother and the dancing chickens, and she said something to me, because I used to back in when I was a kid, I used to prepare the Saturday lunch of a roast chicken. And one day I was putting it in the oven. I don't know if I got some grease on my hands, or I don't know, the weight of the chicken caught me out, but I dropped the bloody thing on the floor and potatoes went everywhere, and the chicken skidded across the floor. Anyway, I rinsed it all off and I put it back in the pan with all the potatoes, and I put it in the oven and cooked it, and my nan turned to me and said, "Oh, it tastes better when it's been on the floor, doesn't it?" And I went, "How did you know?" And she said, You left a potato in the corner of the room." And so when she saw the dancing chickens for the first time, she said, "Is that what happened with that chicken dinner?" And so I always remember that, and it always makes me a little bit teary, because it just we wept with laughter when she said that to me, because of the roast chicken dinner. Got absolutely nothing to do with Peter Gabriel or this review, but I felt I had the need to share the legend of the chicken dinner. Now you've heard it. So then that leads us into Don't Give Up. Don't Give Up. Another amazing, iconic track, featuring the vocal talents of Kate Bush. It was meant to be country and western, I believe. I think he wanted Dolly Parton to sing it. They don't hold me on that. Yeah, I mean, I have a bit of an issue, because we have Peter Gabriel singing about a nice upper middle class lad who'd been to Charterhouse, singing about unemployment. His breeding alone meant that he was never going to be unemployed, because I'm sure his father and his father's friends would have found him a job. These were captains of industry, and so to have somebody from the upper echelons of our classes singing about unemployment, as a militant socialist when I was 15, I found it very difficult to deal with, and I still do. But the sentiment's nice, and the bass from Tony Levin is a legendary sound. He achieved it by stuffing nappies down the bridge end of his bass guitar to mute the strings, and I love that bass sound. Though I do, like I say, I do find the song a little bit hard to get through. It's a bit sentimental, a bit mawkish, but there you go. This is followed by That Voice Again, upbeat number. Yeah, it's alright. It's almost kind of one of the lesser songs on the record. I just remember, again, it's the percussion, it's the crashing hi-hats and cymbals that I remember, because again, Gabriel was very anti cymbals and hi-hats in his previous albums. In this, I think Daniel Lanois, who was the producer, convinced him to use that kind of percussion. That's what I remember about That Voice Again. I like it. It doesn't really leave an impression. Now, if we turn the tape over, or the album, because we're talking about the old version, the original version, In Your Eyes is the opening track, and I like it like that. They've swapped it around in subsequent pressings and put In Your Eyes as the last track of the album. I don't like that. I like it being the opener to the B-side. In Your Eyes is a great love song. It's probably the greatest love song ever, with the vocal accompaniment, amazing sounds from Youssou N'Dour. Again, when I heard his voice the first time and subsequent times, I just thought, wow, what is this? First of all, what is this language? What is he singing? And then I think this is where I've got my love from Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. The voice as an instrument, and you hear Youssou N'Dour going off on one. It just elevates the whole song at the end. Again, it's a little bit mawkish, it's a little bit sentimental, but it holds up well. It's a good live favourite. I love the video they produced for it. It's like a literal interpretation of the song, and it's quite amusing. Everything is utterly literal. Then we go to Mercy Street, which is based on the poem by a poet, obviously, because you know poets write poems. You know, did you know that? A lady named Anne Sexton, and I always found it very haunting, Mersey Street. The idea of, you know, going off onto the water again. Me and water, being a Pisces, sign of the fish. I find it the imagery in it very deep and very involving, and Gabriel's performance on it very good. His the emotion, you know, even though it's just a studio recording, there's just so much depth to that song, you know, in terms of the production and the way he uses his voice. It's a slight song. There's not a lot going on, you know, in terms of instrumentation, but it's all about the voice, and that's where you hear it with Mersey Street. And then he follows it up by completely flipping it on his head with Big Time, which is which is just noise, but it's a good noise, and it's really an illustration of the time, because it's the 80s, the 1980s. I don't know if you youngsters, you young whippersnappers, will be able to remember back that far, but the 1980s was all about greed, being good, and success, and having the big mobile phone, and being a yuppie, young, upwardly mobile. And Big Time kind of illustrates that, but from like a rock star / celebrity email perspective. And yeah, I like it. It's a good, fun little song. Gabriel takes the piss out of himself. The video is again superb. A lot of stop action animation, stop frame animation. It's just a great video. And I really like the song. I think there's another great remix by John Patoka of that, 12-inch at the time. Yeah, big time. I remember finding a copy of the CD single for about a pound in Tower Records, I believe, and it was all dusty and scratched up, and when I put it in my CD player, it just played the first few bars of it on a loop forever, and it sounded surreal. I should have made a dub of it, but instead I foolishly cleaned the CD, and then it played perfectly. But yeah, I like Big Time. Got a lot of time for it. I think it's great. And then he flips it all around again, because you know you just get it. That's what I like about this album. It's perfectly structured. He draws you in and throws you out and draws you in again. We have We Do What We're Told, Milgram's 37, which is an old track going back to his third album. I think the Americans call it Melt. But yeah, it goes back that far. I think he performed it live on occasion. It's about the experiment, about the mind experiment of Professor, what's his name, Milgram, and getting people to press the buzzer to make people have shocks. You know about that psychological experiment. They don't really get shocks, but they get. You can kind of identify who's a psychopath and who's not, because some people refuse to shock people with electricity, and that's the idea. The idea is that if you can, whole groups can be influenced to do things that they wouldn't necessarily do. That's why we do what we're told to do. That's why it's dangerous. People in groups are dangerous. The individual, not so, but people in large groups are dangerous because they can act in ways that they wouldn't necessarily do. This is why you get riots and email. This is why riots and things happen, because it's the safety of the anonymity of the group. It's getting a bit deep, isn't it? It's getting a bit deep for a prog review. But yeah, you get the idea. And then the whole album is lovingly wrapped up by a song I'd heard before. This is the picture, Excellent Birds. You didn't get this on the vinyl. You got it on the CD. I had the CD and the tape. Because for me Walkman. You remember the Walkman? And this is the picture. Excellent Birds appeared on Laurie Anderson's Mr. Heartbreak album in a different format, and we get it's completely rewritten from the ground up. I think it's only the vocals that are the same. You have on guitar Nile Rodgers, who plays just the most fantastic guitar, like it just, you know, just works so well, and it rounds off the album. That's the album done, and it's, you know, it's a fantastic record, and you know, what can you say? It's, yeah, lots of people on it. You know, Peter Gabriel, obviously, Tony Levin, Dave Rose, Jerry Marotta on the drums, Manu Katché as well, Stuart Copeland, Daniel Lanois producing and appearing, Wayne Jackson on the trumpets, P.P. Arnold, the legendary singer who had the Nice as her backing band. She does backing vocals on Sledgehammer. Kate Bush, obviously, Shankar on violin, Yusin Adur, Jim Kerr, Bill Laswell, bass guitar, Nile Rodgers, of course, and Laurie Anderson. What an all-star cast. Yeah, it's just an amazing record. It's a product of its time. It is a product of the 1980s, but he eschews all the trappings of 80s production to produce something that's almost timeless. Yeah, some of the hi-hat work, some of the high frequencies you get on the record are a little bit telling of the period, but you compare it to Invisible Touch, you wouldn't know that this was necessarily an 80s album. It could be a 90s album. But again, it's completely different to what went before. P. Gabriel 4. I think you Americans call it Security. It's one with a big. And it's very different to Us, which came a good few years later. It was the commercial breakout. It was the one that saved Gabriel from insurmountable debt. It meant that he could buy his own studio instead of operating out of Bascom House. Or is it Boscombe House? But I always get a pronunciation. Bascom House. Instead of operating out of there, which is basically a glorified cowshed, he could buy and create real-world studios. There'd be no real-world studios. And without real-world studios, there'd be no real-world label. Without real-world label, there'd be none of the great music that exists. And it's 25 years. September, well, next month, they're releasing a lovely big box set celebrating 25 years of Real World Records, which is well worth checking out because a lot of my favourite albums are on that label. And yeah, I mean, so you can see it's very, very important. It's not only is it important to Gabriel, but it's important to a lot of artists that came after him. The whole world music, he was able to bring world music to the masses via his Real World label, thanks to the success of So, and the continued success of So. You know, because I imagine it still all does rather well for him. I mean, is it the perfect album? Yeah. I mean, it's not perfect because. Still some bits. I mean, this is again, it's just a personal thought. You know, I mean, you know, don't give up. You know, it goes on a bit, and I find it a little bit hard to get through. That voice again is. I mean, you know, but it was just at the time it was a breath of fresh air. It was something completely unlike Gabriel. The fact that he could write a pop tune. He'd been hiding it all that time, you know, by being so idiosyncratic. He could actually write a pop tune. He could do the Genesis thing, you know. Not that the Genesis. I think that he was more deliberate. This album was more deliberate, the poppy, than Invisible Touch. I think Gabriel was, with the help of Dan Awad, made a record that was meant to be for general consumption. Whereas, you know, Genesis were just doing what Genesis did. I don't think they had any grand plan. I think Gabriel was a little bit more, not cynical, but a little bit more planned than the Genesis side of things. So imagine if Gabriel had stayed with Genesis. I think Genesis would have been even poppier than you could imagine. You know, all these people go, oh, Phil Collins, he killed Genesis. No. Look at what Peter Gabriel did. He created the ultimate pop album with So. So if he'd have stayed with Genesis, Genesis could have ended up doing this kind of thing earlier. More pop hits. Because as a band, they'd have needed to make more success. You know, as if they were a 5-piece or a 4-piece, need to sell those records. Remember, they only started making money when Gabriel left, and so I imagine if Gabriel would have stayed with Genesis, it would have been a much more poppy and upbeat affair than you could have ever. They wouldn't be doing 20-minute epics like Supper's Ready with the Lindrum. No, that wouldn't happen. They'd be doing more stuff like Sledgehammer and Big Time, but with Phil Collins on the drums. There you go. Just my two penn'orth. In an alternative universe, that is happening. But anyway, when it comes to a rating, well, what can I say? It's going to get 5 Sledgehammers out of 5, isn't it? That's 5 Sledgehammers out of 5. It was such an important album. Again, with my musical development, I'd already got into Peter Gabriel before this. I think I had 1, 2, 3 on vinyl, and I got this, and again it was completely different, but it wasn't hard to fall in love with it. It's just a very good record. I think it's only about 45 minutes long. It's not crazy long. I love short albums. I love albums of proper album length, between 35 and 45 minutes. And it's just a really really varied lot of tunes. But it's not my favourite. My favourite is Us. You know that. Everybody knows that. So yeah, I better stop now because I've been whittering on long enough. Invisible Touch and So are two sides of the same coin. Think about it. They happened exactly the same moment in the band and Peter Gabriel's history. Both their biggest commercial successes. Both at the same time. Within a month of each other. And they were operating independently, and 2 amazingly popular, successful albums happened. If that isn't synchronicity, I don't know what is. Anyway, check out So, and more importantly, check out Invisible Touch. Is this a prog album? No. No. It only gets vaguely prog with We Do What We're Told, because it's just a little bit left field. But this ain't prog. Invisible Touch is more prog. This isn't prog. So I don't even know why I'm including it in this list, but it just seemed to make sense at the time. It's Peter Gabriel, isn't it? He's the prog father. And with that, I shall stop. I shall stop immediately. Only one more thing to say. Prog on.